This is African American History is American History. In the shadows of America's complicated past, there are stories few dare to tell. Stories that challenge everything we think we know about slavery, race, and power. And this is one of them. The story of William Ellison, a black man born a slave who would rise to become South Carolina's wealthiest black slave owner. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, only a small fraction of Southern whites owned slaves. And yet, among the free black population, the proportion of slave owners was strikingly higher. In places like New Orleans, nearly 28% of free blacks owned slaves. And in South Carolina, a handful of free black families, some owning dozens of slaves, stood out among their peers. At the top of that list was William Ellison. Born into bondage sometime between 1790 and 1802, he was given the name April, likely after the month of his birth. At age 12, he began an apprenticeship in carpentry, blacksmithing, and cotton gin making, rare trades for a young slave. Even more remarkable, he was taught to read, write, and keep books. In 1816, his owner, named William Ellison, petitioned the court to free April, vouching for his good character and his ability to make an honest living. With freedom granted, April chose to honor the man who had once owned him by taking the name William Ellison, a new name for a new life. Settling in Statesburg, South Carolina, Ellison got to work, hiring slaves from local owners, building cotton gins, and steadily buying land. By 1820, just 4 years after gaining his freedom, Ellison purchased his first 2 slaves. Within a few short decades, he had built an empire, manufacturing cotton gins, sold as far away as Mississippi, acquiring over 900 acres of prime land, and owning 63 slaves by the time of his death. This is African American History is American History. William Ellison was no reluctant slaveholder. He was a shrewd businessman, profiting not only from his factory and fields, but also from slave breeding, one of the grimmest corners of the institution. Young female slaves were raised specifically to produce children, many of whom were then sold for profit. It was reported that William Ellison's slaves were among the worst fed and clothed in the district. Runaways were not uncommon, and when they fled, he, like many others, pursued them with slave catchers. In 1840, Ellison moved his family into a fine home beside prominent white families. He worshipped at the Episcopalian church, sitting proudly on the main floor, a place usually reserved for the town's white elite. He trained his sons as cotton gin makers and sent them north to Canada for their education. They married well, choosing mulatto spouses from Charleston's upper black society. By every measure of wealth, Ellison had surpassed most of his white neighbors. By 1860, his wealth was 15 times that of the average white citizens, and only 5% of South Carolinians, white or black, owned more land than he did. When the war broke out in 1861, the Ellison family backed the Confederacy. They donated food, supplies, and cash, more than $9,000 invested in Confederate bonds. One of Ellison's grandsons, John Wilson Buckner, even enlisted in the Confederate Army, a rare illegal act for a black man, but one made possible by the family's wealth and reputation. Buckner fought bravely and died from wounds sustained in battle. Like many others, the Ellisons' fortunes crumbled after the South's defeat. Their Confederate bonds and currency became worthless overnight. A way of life built on human bondage was gone. This is African American History is American History. The story of William Ellison forces us to reckon with an uncomfortable truth. Slavery was not a simple divide of white oppressors and black victims. It was a vast, brutal system, one that, when opportunity allowed, some free blacks also participated in. We often prefer stories that fit cleanly into boxes of good and evil, right and wrong. But history is rarely so tidy. William Ellison's life reminds us that America's past was a tapestry of contradictions. Wealth built on cruelty, ambition rising from oppression. And while slavery ended, the scars it left behind will always remain woven into the very fabric of this nation. This has been African American History is American History. I'm Harlan Kearsley, and on behalf of everyone involved with African American History is American History, thank you for listening. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe. Once you do, you'll be notified as soon as new episodes are posted. Thanks again, and please stay safe. African American History is American History. Copyright H.C. Kearsley, 2025.